We're all here today to celebrate the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, and I want to welcome you to this webinar hosted by Disability in Wales and Africa and Hub Cymru Africa, highlighting the importance of inclusion. First of all, some housekeeping rules. Please keep your microphones muted unless you're invited to speak. Be respectful and do not use offensive language. And remember, we're all here today as world citizens, sharing the lived experiences and knowledge of our esteemed speakers, who today are Ruth Fabi from Disability Arts Cymru, Anna Ayan Farah from Somaliland Mental Health Organization, followed by a question and answer session. Now we're limited to 5 minutes, so please use the chat facility to post any questions you have. We may not have time to respond to every question, so bear that in mind. Following that, there'll be presentations from Uganda, and we'll have Sibata's story, an amazing video. Then Dr. Busula, who's a community-based Community-Based Rehabilitation African Network, and then followed by questions and answers, and after that a 10-minute comfort break for all of us. I think we might need it. Then afterwards it's going to be really exciting because we've got presentations from Kenya. We've got the Maro North Disability Community Centre from Samuel Mwiti, excuse me, Samuel, if I pronounce your name wrong, and Lucy Nakatha. After that, we're going to have followed by a questions and answer session, just a 5-minute one. And then after that, we're going to have a 25-minute panel discussion. If you have any points you want to put into the panel, please use the chat facility at the bottom of the screens. Then after some closing remarks, you will have 5 minutes to feedback your thoughts on today. Now we have great pleasure in introducing our first speaker, Ruth Fabi, the Chief Executive Officer of Disability Arts Cymru. So welcome, Ruth.
Prynhada, good afternoon, everyone. It's such an honor to be here. I'm just going to give you a little description of myself. I'm a white woman in my early 60s, dark hair with going grey, quite dramatically at the moment, wearing glasses and have a dark top on. At the back of me, I have the Welsh phrase, "Ni chain ein delay," which means we shall not be erased, which is a cross-nation project we are leading on with countries in the European Union. I'm, as I've been introduced, the Chief Exec of Disability Arts in Cymru. We're a national organisation made up mainly of disabled and deaf people who work in the arts sector. And it's important that I can give you that context to this important work and focus on inclusion, because the arts is one place we are so totally missed out on in terms of the lived experience. I'm not going to give a PowerPoint presentation today, I'm just going to talk. So can I just check my pace is all right for everybody to follow me? Yep. Okay, I get very impassioned about the work I do in disability and deaf arts. I've actually been working in the sector for almost 30 years. Before that, I trained in the arts only after I had my first child in my 20s. Before that, as a deaf woman, I didn't have much opportunity to succeed in school. I was often ignored, overlooked, and I took that on board and became very quiet and withdrawn. After I had my first child, I decided I wanted to get fit, went to a dance class to do it, and found I could perform, and I've not stopped since. So it's been a really important journey for me, finding the arts, because I started to work in mime and then using sign language to tell stories. And I still felt excluded. I still had the messages on me that we're a problem as disabled people. and I was always saying sorry. And I've had to learn not to do that. And my journey through disability arts has helped me find a voice and a confidence that's made me realize that we are excluded because of systemic ableism in our cultures that put us outside everyday life, that marginalize it. We get not just left out, we actually can be oppressed and not seen as valid and stigmatized and apologized to and worse. So we need to change that, those different stories and viewpoints that people have about us. And I feel the arts is a really good way of doing that. As today is International Disability Day, and I think in the future it's going to be called Disability Rights Day, we are bringing our lived experience across the globe, united to say we don't want to be left out or ignored. So inclusion means to value us, to bring us in at every level throughout society, in the education we get, so we don't grow up thinking we're a problem for everybody, through to any sort of choices we may want to make around our careers. Now, I know as disabled people, we don't do silly things. None of us want to be a bus driver if we're visually impaired. We're not that silly, we know, but what we don't get is a culture that encourages what we can do. It puts us down. So we need to find a way of being at the tables that hold the power within our cultures and our societies to change the narrative from our lived experience. And the best way we work to, I feel, is the social model of disability, which changes the way we use language around disability. And I think language can be one of the first ways through that we are placed in that excluded position. And using a social model, we like to say, we're disabled by society. So my impairments, I actually have changed the way I talk about being deaf and say I have a deafness gain, not a hearing loss, because a lot of issues around our impairments is put in a deficit we can't do, we can't measure up to that sort of way of working. And people don't look at the fact that the way we operate in society today is we've got skills and strategic ways of being included ourselves that often gets ignored by non-disabled people who've not had the lived experience of disability. One of the things we're doing, I have got so little time and trying to capture everything, it's not going to happen, but I just wanted to pick up on the themes about why inclusion is so important. But we know what happens when we're not included, but what we need to do when inclusion is really happening at the heart of our lives. In the arts sector, because I can't go over everything that we do in society, that we're in fact impacted by transport, education, health experiences, and we need to battle in them all. We can't battle them all in one go. So our battle is through, our culture is our weapon to challenge the way we're seen, the way we're portrayed, the way we're not included on the stage, in the TV, or as artists. So we've been working with the Welsh Government and the Arts Council of Wales to create a manifesto on our cultural rights. We're launching that this afternoon, and we are challenging him with 9 demands to say, you must put this in place, you must give us funding. For me, as a disabled woman who was put down so much through my experience of life, to actually say, I've got rights and I'm demanding this, feels really weird for me. But actually, most people have their rights without even thinking about it. It just happens. But we have to remind people we are always here. We're left out. So we're going to be launching that today at 4 o'clock. I'm going to put the link in because you're more than welcome to join it. It's a Zoom event. But it's a way of, when we're included, we won't be them over there or excluded and forgotten about. We'll be part of everyday life. And that's kind of my mantra in life. Disability is a human issue. We're either disabled or not disabled yet, but we are so too often shunted. So we need to use the things we have around us to be more inclusive in how we can go forward and not be quiet. and challenge, but go to the right places, because I don't like wasting time with people who don't get it. Go to someone who does. So there's loads more I can say, but I'll stop there because I'm sure my 7 minutes are up. But thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you so much for that, Ruth. I think most of us here can understand when we're with you, and that was excellent, and your timing was brilliant. So anyway, next we're going to go over to Ayan Farah from the Somaliland Mental Health Organization. Aria.
Hi guys, so my name is Ayan and I'm the office coordinator for the Somaliland Mental Health Organisation. So me myself, I don't suffer from a disability, but we work with vulnerable people who primarily have mental health conditions in Somalia where mental health is a major taboo. And essentially a lot of the time we see that the mental health conditions are paired with either visible or non-visible disabilities, and we basically help to raise awareness on those conditions, kind of try and remove the taboo aspect of that, and just stimulate discussion, as well as actively having interventions, like in terms of medical interventions, and in that sense as well. So first of all, I'd like to say thank you for allowing me to speak today. It was lovely listening to your speech there, Ruth. I did literally get a lot from that, so thank you for that to begin with. I wanted to touch on, first of all, why was inclusion important, and like I said, Ruth, she did touch a lot on what I've got to say here as well. First and foremost, we need to highlight that inclusion is a right of everybody in every kind of sector that you look at. It provides avenues of accessibility whereby individuals are able to participate in society without the presence of barriers, and it allows for equal opportunity, whether in the education sector, work, or day-to-day life. And it's apparent that a lack of inclusion leads to barriers that can prevent the disabled community to progress in a number of areas, and we see that today, whether it's in education. And I didn't touch on creativity because I didn't think of that, but even that, shedding light on that, it's come to my realization now that it's literally in a lot of areas that I didn't realize myself. I mentioned infrastructure as well, so we can have environmentally a lack of inclusion, where the infrastructure design isn't inclusive. So we're not even looking at it on a major level, we're looking at it on a day-to-day level, whether disabled people have to think about a lot more than a non-disabled person when taking public transport or interacting with society on a day-to-day basis. So we need to look at it from a holistic approach, and that's why essentially with the Somaliland Mental Health Organisation, we try to incorporate mental health and well-being into it, because a lot of the time it can lead to stuff like a lack of inclusion can lead to stuff like isolation, which is known to be a leading cause of depression and anxiety. So just emphasizing the fact that when we look at this, we need to ensure that it's not like a blanket approach, and we take steps, because it's essentially necessary. It's not why is it important, it's necessary. We need to be looking at this in all areas. What are the effects of a lack of inclusion? So we touched on well-being, and the implications that that has, and we commonly observe, like I mentioned, with the organisation that I work with, prevalence of mental health conditions with our service users is often accompanied with the presence of either visible or non-visible disabilities. So according to the World Health Organization, 1 in 3 Somalis suffer, this is in Somalia and East Africa, suffer from mental health illnesses, and Somalia in particular has experienced a lot of drastic increase in mental health sufferers post-civil war. So stuff like PTSD have contributed, lack of work, financial impoverishment, etc. And we note that some of these mental health conditions can be considered disabilities because it has long-term debilitating influences on individuals. So we see that there are holistic factors that can influence an individual's well-being overall and overall quality of life when there's a lack of those factors. So we need to be taking those into consideration as well when we're looking at disability. So just emphasizing, like the main point that I want to emphasize is whenever you look at disability, you need to take a holistic approach. You can't be like a one shoe fits all, especially because there's a lot of different types of disabilities. We can't assume that it's the same for everybody and everyone's experiences are the same. So that's one thing that I wanted to highlight. I wanted to mention that I did touch on, I was reading a paper that aimed to understand inclusion from the perspective of children with disabilities in areas such as play, participation, and friendship. And that took a quote from a 12-year-old participant named Brandon A, who had cerebral palsy. Ooh, I hope you can still hear me. Who had cerebral palsy and stated, "I know it's being included, but you just don't feel like you are included." So that's a statement from participant Brandon. And what we can take from that is that inclusion, what is meant from inclusion is a subjective experience, and it's interpreted differently. So in order for us to implement it successfully, we need to ensure that those who it impacts are at the center of the discussion. And so people like me are learning from the community rather than just assuming and essentially listening to them. And I wanted to say that things that I wasn't necessarily aware of, even now listening to Ruth's part of the speech, was areas like creativity, where it's not necessarily something that comes into my mind off the bat, but listening back to it, it's something that you're like, yeah, that's something that, it's not something we consider on a day-to-day basis, let alone someone who wants to be involved in that area. So I hope I didn't go over my 7 minutes. And yeah.
Well, thanks, Anne. Actually, you've done really well. You're within time, which is absolutely brilliant. Listen now, both speakers, Anne and Ruth, if anybody's got any questions, can please people put their questions into the chat room and let us know that you've got a question, because and until we have any questions coming in, listen, Ruth, that was absolutely brilliant what you had talked about with on the creative arts side of things. And I think there's probably a lot of disabled people who have got the creativity inside of them, who are probably afraid to express themselves because of this not feeling included, and to be able to have the ability to do so. And
the early things that happened with the UK's disability movement was how they used the arts to articulate the issues. So disability cabarets, Peter's works of art, that all show our life, our experiences, and it really helped articulate our battle to our rights to be included. And there's still a very strong element on that. In terms of the work we have at Disability Arts Cymru, we have over 450 disabled and deaf people who live across Wales, who are making art, from theatre work to art in galleries to digital connections, but we're also doing a lot of collaboration with different countries. And over the years, it's been amazing to see how the arts brings that connection from our different life experience and our cultures.
Thank you, Ruth. Now, I've got a question here, actually. Sorry for cutting. From Paul Linderwood, who asked, what could be the role of disabled people, including people who experience mental health issues and who live in Wales and other industrialised countries, in supporting their counterparts in Africa?
I think stimulating discussion is important first and foremost, because I think within Wales and Africa, there's not much of a connection. There's not a lot of communication happening in the area. So stimulating discussion, I think, is a step forward to begin with, and then hopefully building on that, going on. I hope that answers.
Yeah, thank you, Anne. That's Paul. I hope that answers the question. Now we're going to a question here. Looks like from Terry Wilson, who actually says, "I would think perhaps the use of the arts also has a positive connection and the impact on mental well-being." Yeah. And I can only agree with that, because as a disabled person who my mind trying to travel a little bit sometimes, you know, I think the arts is good. I personally write quite a lot, and I'm an appreciator of art in a visual sense. So is there any other questions anybody got? Nothing coming in there. Now we've got another minute before we pop over to Uganda. So if either Ruth or Anne wants to say any final comments, they're more than welcome.
I think the arts, as we've looked at, is a really powerful way of connecting, and we can do that more over lots of impairment issues. And many of us who are disabled have mental health issues as well, and we often box them off, but we actually need to see at the heart that we are people and we all have our own expression, and we need to be able to express that and share it and connect. And I love the fact that through the arts we can make international connections. So I'd love to reach out to people in the room and let them know about us. I've already put a link in there, but I'll put another one in if you want to come to our conference later, or just get in touch. That would be great. But also it'd be great to talk to Ayaan about what the work she's doing and see if we can have more connections there.
Excellent. Okay, well, listen, I think it's time now. We're going to move over to Uganda. So I want to welcome Sibata, and we're going to see Sibata's video. And right there, over to you.
My name is Julius Sibata. I'm a deaf carpenter. In my heart and blood. Initially, I was working alone in my workshop until I employed Baluku, whom I met at Namirembe Vocational Institute. He had quality carpentry skills. Then I employed Eric from Burundi, which made 2 deaf carpenters working with me. In March 2020, I suddenly heard people were dying. I was shocked. Deaf people didn't know. We had no clue. Then Baluku didn't show up to work, which got me worried. Perhaps he was sick or had a situation. For 2 days he didn't show up. On Tuesday night, the president made an announcement. I didn't know about this. Many people were unaware. As I drove to work the following day, police arrested me at Nsambia. I didn't understand why, and I was perplexed. What had I done? I was going to work and I was stopped. Police arrested me and threw me at the police station. What was the problem? A senior police officer came to me. I told him I'm deaf. He referred me to another officer who was busy. I complained, asked what I had done wrong. The officer asked if I hadn't seen the president's TV announcement. I knew nothing, hadn't seen anything. There was so much confusion. I was at the station from morning till afternoon. I continued complaining, asking them to let me go to work. They said cars are not allowed to move. I was stuck, detained at the police station. I waited. The senior officer told me that if they release me, I must go home. Then I remembered thinking intensely about why Baluku was missing from work on Monday and Tuesday. Maybe he was beaten by police. This saddened me deeply. I felt great pain. The following Wednesday, I was perplexed to find no cars at all, nothing. Everyone was confined at home. It was so strange. How was I going to get money? Food? How? I have children and a large family. One morning, I decided to walk to work. Setting off at 7 a.m., I arrived at 10 a.m. from Munyonyo to Ntinda. There were hardly any people on the road, instead roadblocks everywhere. I arrived at 10 a.m. feeling so much pain. I had no energy and was so hungry. I worked very few hours because at 4 p.m. I had to close and start walking back home, as there was curfew at 6 p.m. Working from 10 to 4 was so insufficient, not enough time. A few days later, the president announced that all work must stop. All workshops and businesses were ordered to close. I got so stressed. Government announced distribution of food relief. There was not a single deaf person who got this food. Many disabled people didn't get any food. The deaf were not aware. During lockdown, I experienced loss of business. Customers complained, asking me to deliver their furniture, but there was no transport. These government laws, I didn't know when they would end. I felt helpless. Three months of lockdown presented huge challenges. Thank God, relief came when a client offered me work at her home. I felt good and began searching for ways to get there. Fortunately, my wife helped me get her friend's bicycle. In the morning, I cycled to work. And the income helped me buy food. Then again, I'm thankful to DeafLink Uganda, which began a food distribution initiative for the deaf. A group of us, 6 competitors, received a gift pack of food and supplies. The president announced ease of lockdown. Schools were gradually reopened. Unfortunately, I faced barriers as my workshop was in a school premise. The school head teacher expelled me from my premise because of government laws on restricted movement. I decided to move my workshop here at my home. DeafLink Uganda gave me support that included poles, nails, timber, and various materials. But the business has not improved. Deaf people don't understand the COVID-19 vaccine and wonder what they are being vaccinated for. Is it for HIV? It's vague. Some think you want to kill them. Government should mobilize the deaf and clearly explain the vaccine, not only in the cities but also in the rural areas. Challenges remain the same. Nevertheless, I started a cattle rearing project. I have 4 cows for milk production. This business supplements my carpentry. Recently, we had a calf. In future, I plan to use the cow dung for biogas production.
Well, that was brilliant. That was really, really fantastic. That's an excellent video. Listen, I think now we'll go over to Dr. Abdul Baswala, the Community-Based Rehabilitation Africa Network. So, Abdul, over to you.
Thank you very much, moderator. As rightfully introduced, I'm Abdul Busurwa from Uganda. I was born visually impaired. I have always had residual vision. It does not increase, doesn't reduce. And I've lived like this for all my life. Mr. Moderator, you will have to warn me when it is about maybe 1 minute to the end of the presentation. I went to school in a fairly special school, but with a bit of inclusive education. Part of it, we had a specialized teacher who was teaching us Braille and mathematics. But again, we had to attend a mainstream classes where we only had to listen and get notes from our friends. So inclusion is very important when we're talking about education, because if you don't get material in Braille, it becomes very, very hard to proceed with your studies. If you copy from friends, it means you're going to copy all their mistakes and you learn with those mistakes. If you going to rely on the teacher is also very busy. They have so many other things to do, and they may not give you all the attention you need. Bringing it forward to today, I will say that inclusion is very important because as a blind person, I am a victim of COVID-19. In June this year, I fell sick and even went into intensive care because of COVID. But what saved me is that I got a special letter from my local leader, political leaders, and I was able to use my car to go to hospital as long as I had that letter in hand. And two, I have a very kind and supportive wife. So she was always driving me to the hospital in the wee hours of the night, in the morning, in the afternoon. Sometimes when I lost my memory and I could not do certain things, you could drive me around just to ensure that I was in a good state or to recover my mind somehow. So this was very, very helpful. But like that video, I also did not get government support. We did not get food rations from government. I had to live on my own resources. And it wasn't very easy, but I managed because here and there, I could get support from friends. And by then, I could not go to work. But somehow, I'm talking about this year because we had another lockdown last year. So we had learned our lessons. This year we had a few stocks. By the time the president announced the second lockdown, we had stocked something. Of course, the time we were in lockdown was really long. It was 42 days. So at some point, the system broke down and we could not support ourselves fully. But thank God I recovered and I'm now able to do everything of mine. I can go back to work and I am doing everything as I used to do it, although I still get some cough for some minutes and it goes away. Sometimes flu is a little bit heavier than it used to be before I got the COVID experience. Another thing that I wanted to look at is Paul introduced me to this webinar, saying that I'm working with CBR Africa Network. I left that organization at the beginning of this year, and I'm now lecturing at Chambogo University, but still in the department that takes care of things like rehabilitation. They are teaching rehabilitation. So I'm part of that department, Community and Disability Studies. And I've been there for now about four months. I joined in August, in the middle of August this year. So I wanted to also talk about the issue that, inclusion is very important because it is by which we are recognized as human beings and probably recognized as an integral part of society. Because without that, we shall miss out on planning. They will not plan for us. For example, just imagine a person with hearing impairment who benefits from lip reading. You cannot speak in a mask and the deaf person will be able to pick what you're saying unless this mask is made in a special way that the point of the mouth is made colorless and you're able to see the movements of the lips. But if it's an ordinary mask, then somebody will not be able to see and understand what you're speaking. People without the hearing impairment may not appreciate that. But if you're speaking to somebody that lost their hearing when they are old enough, they will tell you how beneficial it is to read the lips of somebody else talking and how it contributes to their communication. For us as blind people, we rely on Braille, and I studied from primary to PhD using Braille, although later on I also had to use other technologies like screen readers and other technologies like optical character recognition. But then the basics have to be in place if we must be included, especially in meetings and any other activity that requires the use of information as a key factor. So those are some of the issues that I thought are very, very important in terms of inclusion. And when inclusion is not implemented, chances are high that our potential as people with disabilities will not be explored to the full. And when it's not, you find that many of us will live a very miserable life, because even if you choose to be a dependent of other people, you reach a time when other people get tired of looking after you and you have to fend for yourself. Or they can look after you, but time comes when you get a family, how will they look after your wife, your children, and everybody? So really, we need an inclusive environment where we are allowed to explore everything, our talents, our potential, so that we are able to contribute to society. Because many people don't know that persons with disabilities can contribute in terms of employment. We can be excellent workers. We contribute by paying taxes, but when society is not inclusive enough, all those are not appreciated. So really, it is really the right thing to do in the 21st century, to include everybody in development, to include everybody in education, in employment, and everything that pertains to society. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Abdul. Such wise words. Now, we want to invite people to put questions forward, and just going to read some comments that have come through on the chat in the meantime. We had one from, I'm just catching up with things here, from Nick Andrews, who actually found it, he found that he focused more on the signing and body language than the text, but when Sabata's voice was off on this video. And it's very true. I think probably most of us, we focused more on, and you learn a lot from studying body and body language, and it's good. Then we've got, well, we've got all sorts of people responding here. We had Rebecca Mansell, who said it's so good to see deaf innovation come through at the worst possible time. And Cecilia Waramu was very inspired by Sabata's little video. And, you know, I thought Abdul's passion and feelings are so much shared by all of us. And they need to be said, they need to be spoken and expressed. So anybody else want to come up with any points, any questions? Yes, we got Donald Rust, who says, how does the attitude of society and government and government impact on inclusion in Uganda? So perhaps Abdul, you can.
Let me give an answer directly to Donald on that one, because I might forget. It has a very huge impact. When this government, we know we have had one government for 35 years and still counting. When the government had just come, they embraced disability, and that helped us a lot, because before that we were not represented anywhere. But when this government welcomed us, we started organizing ourselves in such a way that we could get political representation from the lowest levels at the village level to the national level at the National Assembly. So that was very important. Two, we have progressive laws. There are so many laws with clauses relating to disability. And that's because, first of all, we are represented there. But secondly, government people, at least to some extent, appreciate that disability is a real and existential problem in society, which has to be tackled head on. So that is very, very important. However, of course, public officials have some negative attitudes, and one setback that we've suffered all these years is that many people with disabilities have not been given jobs within the government confines, and that's very, very important, because the other day when we were doing a symposium on for this day, in commemoration of this day, we realized that people with disabilities only form 1.9% of people employed in the public service. And out of the 1.9, people with physical disabilities take something like 80% of that 1.9, and then followed by people with vision impairment with a miserable something like 9%, and the rest share the remaining part. You can imagine.
Yes, I can
just
imagine.
1.9.
Yes, thank you very much for those remarks. And now listen, we're going to coming up now to, we're going to have a comfort break. And, you know, I want us all to be able to recharge, refresh yourselves, whatever you need to do. And we're going to join again in 10 minutes. So just after 12:30, we can all join again. But listen, thank you everybody who's taken part so far, and I look forward to seeing you in 10 minutes. Thank you. Okay, everybody, it's 12:30, and I hope you all was able to have a nice break, and everybody's able to join back in again. And we're now going to go to Kenya. I think it's so nice, you know, we were in Uganda, next up Kenya, and here we are in Wales or wherever we are. And I think it's absolutely brilliant we're sharing this all today to get together. So first of all, I want to introduce Samuel Mwiti. Mwiti. Okay, Samuel, over to you.
Samuel, you're on mute. You might need to unmute yourself to be able to, for us to be able to hear.
Hello.
There we go. Hi, that works.
How are you? My name is Amwiti from Kenya, representing disability. Yeah. And so let's inclusion policy of improving equal access to opportunities and resources for people who might be excluded.
Okay, we're having some difficulty there, Samuel, with hearing you properly. I think it's a technical issue. I don't know if it's if it can be sorted out at this end at all, or if it's to do with the your access to the internet in Kenya.
Trevor, I think it might be the internet access. Shall we see if Lucy's able to carry on, and then I'll speak to Samuel?
Yeah, excellent idea. Lucy, can you come in now, please?
Oh yes, good afternoon, everybody. It's afternoon here in Kenya, and I'm calling in from Meru County. Now I can see the host has asked me to start a video, but I'm using a phone because I realized that with my laptop I'm having issues with network. So, and my network was not stable on my laptop. I had requested Peter from CMRU to share the screen on my behalf. I don't know whether he has done. If not, I can just read through my presentation from my laptop, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. I think you might have to read through, Lucy.
So I can read, I can read through.
Oh no, we got some pictures now.
You've got? Oh, yeah. So I don't know whether Peter is able to share. Should I read it through?
We can see it. Please go ahead, Lucy.
Oh, you can see it, my presentation.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so presentation on the importance of inclusion of persons with disabilities at the Dwan IDDP webinar on 30 December 2021. Presenter Lucy Nkatha, Group Coordinator of Kiengu Disability CBO. My contact is there. So the overview is that over the years, persons with disabilities in Meru County faced seclusion. Study in the mid-19th century, where children with disabilities were taken to special schools. Some of us in the group went through that. And the biggest challenge with this kind of seclusion is that persons with disabilities do lose their identity. They don't belong or feel part of their society. They are looked differently, treated differently, and this comes with stigma and discrimination. The less time one spends with family, peers, and community at large, the less they understand their unique abilities and special needs. When MCK Meru North Disability Community Center started, they trained us on advocacy, and as a group, we realized that the genesis of the stigma and discrimination we faced was something we could intervene and influence through lobbying and advocating for our rights. It's then that we decided to form a self-help group, which knocked various public offices to gain acceptance and recognition. We realized later that there is power in numbers, and that's when we joined other like-minded organizations to form a CBO, which is the vehicle that has enabled us to influence the enactment and operationalization of the Meru County Persons with Disabilities Act 2006. Why is inclusion? It's because, number one, we believe when there is inclusion, there is holistic development. Leaving no one behind is the central transformative promise of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goal, interim draft of the UN SDG, Operational Guide for UN Contrary Teams. That was the reference, of course, the interim draft. There is no way a society can claim to be developed when a section of its people are left behind. When persons with disabilities live within their communities and take lead through their representative organization in ensuring that they have a say at the table, their needs are taken into consideration at the planning stage, then they are assured of equal opportunities with the other members of the society. And in fact, that is something that as a group we have come to realize. So number two is an individual dignity of persons with disabilities. One of the principles of CRPD is the respect of inherent dignity, and it is important for persons with disabilities to be included in their communities, as this will foster understanding by the members of the society that as human beings, persons with disabilities
Okay, we've lost your voice a little bit there.
to be able to know what our needs are. Number three is promoting equality. Projects that promote inclusion serve the society as a whole, given that they take deliberate steps to enable equal access to services for all. And some people have worked on equality, and for us as a group, we have also gone a step ahead into demanding for equity for persons with disabilities. And of course, this is in respect of not even leaving any other type of disability behind, because even in the disability movement, some people are left behind, some people with some disabilities. That is the most invisible disabilities, of course. So what happens when there is no inclusion? Where there is no inclusion, there is no enabling environment for social inclusion, hence imbalance in development, which leaves persons with disabilities more vulnerable. It leads to lack of self-worth by persons with disabilities, desperation and loss of the meaning of life, which may cause even depression in its worst. It can even cause a suicidal scenario. So how do we promote inclusion? Number one, by advocating for inclusive planning. It is important that even at the design level of any project or any budget of the government, anything, even when it is not government, even the development partners, whatever they are, when it is time to, like planning, it is good to bring in at that stage the needs and the voice of persons with disabilities. Also, inclusive budgeting, where they budget with a disability lens, so that persons with disabilities and their needs are taken care of by the governments. Empowering persons with disabilities and their representative organizations to take lead in influencing the change they want. And for us here, this is the backbone for, in fact, even when we are talking about the UN Disability Day today, it is important that we empower persons with disabilities to be at the center, to take lead in ensuring that all these things that we are talking about, inclusion, that they have a role to play in ensuring that their needs are taken into consideration and that they are included in their societies. So my parting shot is that accessibility is being able to get in the building. Diversity is getting invited to the table. Inclusion is having a voice at the table. Belonging is having your voice matter at the table. Yeah, thank you all. And it was good meeting all of you people from different areas of this world. And I hope to keep on seeing you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Lucy. That was a really good presentation. The sound was a little bit funny in places, but I think we all got the gist of it. And those messages at the end, well, they're close to all of our hearts, I'm sure. Anyway, we got some questions. We got some questions here. I don't know if Samuel's able to get back online again now, or if he's still experiencing problems getting online. I think that's probably the case. Oh, there we are, Samuel.
Sorry, hi.
Hi, Samuel.
Hi.
I'm sorry, Sam, that it's just not getting through, which is such a pity.
Trevor, I don't think it is working, unfortunately.
No, that's such a shame. Now, I've got some feedback here from various people who corresponded. We got Nick Andrews again saying he loves this talk on collective action to gain inclusion. Makes me think of the work of the University of, I hope I'll get this pronounced right, Adderley Base Majondolo in Durban, where ingenious knowledge is valued. And he's put a link on there, which perhaps we'll put into we'll save and check out afterwards, because it could be good. And Rachel, thanks, Lucy. And, we've, like I said, it's something we all feel very, very passionate about. Now, any other questions you want to put forward? Now, well, I'm going to ask Lucy one, actually. Now, you say you felt excluded at school, and being put into a special school. How do you see a solution to that? I don't know if you can hear me, Lucy.
Yeah, I can hear you, but what is the question?
Well, this thing is special schools, and I know in Kenya, schooling's not is a little bit difficult for people with disabilities. But what do you see as the perfect solution to be included?
What I can say is that in Kenya, we are moving from special schools. We are slowly trying to integrate everybody. We are trying to integrate all children in the local primary schools and local day schools. We have special, what we call a special classes or special unit within the school that is to cater for people with mental disability, but for others with a visual disability, with physical disability, they are being integrated in the same classes with the rest of the students, and we think this is the right way to go, and we've seen some fruits. Because since we started inclusive education, that is when we are now seeing, or integrated education as they were calling it. We are just trying to amend some few laws in the country, so that we can have where the very local schools are able to accommodate people with disabilities.
Oh, thank you, Lucy. Rachel has asked a question here. She understands you're working nationally as well as locally. Can you describe the differences between the urban and rural experience in Kenya? And I think this is something most of us would like to know, because some parts of Kenya can be very remote, and communication and travel is very difficult. So I don't know if you can have an answer to that, Lucy.
What is the question? The exact question, is it about the remoteness, or what about the remote? Because I've not gotten the question well, so I don't know.
Okay,
Can
sorry,
you post it on the chat kindly?
Okay, I'll reread it again. It's actually in the chat. Rachel Lindlewood would like to understand. She understands you're working nationally as well as locally, but can you describe the differences between the urban and rural experience in Kenya?
Okay, yes. Yes, I have read the comment, the question on the chat, and yes, there is a very big difference in terms of the people with disabilities who live in the urban and those that live in the rural areas. For example, like in Nairobi, there are so many organizations that are working towards supporting even children with disabilities in their education during or in their regular educations. So, but and also many organizations, are based in urban areas. The terrain at the remote areas, especially of Meru County, is very bad. Some places, like, they are unreachable. So that means that even those children who are in those areas where there is no means of transport, that means even those children are, secluded, and they are in a secluded place where they are not even able to interact with other children. And also remember the wheelchairs that we get. Most of the wheelchairs that we get, they are not made locally. So they are manufactured from maybe the developed countries where there are the tarmacs, or almost everywhere, the capros. So when they come to the rural areas, those wheelchairs, like, they don't even help much. But we had raised that issue with the National Council for Persons with Disabilities, and the APDK has started to now manufacture wheelchairs that are, that are able to be used in the terrain of the remote areas. So yes, there is a big difference.
Thank you for that,
even in terms of terms of the attitude, the stigma. There is not much stigma in the urban areas as it is in the rural areas. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Lucy. Now I saw
Trevor,
flashing on.
Excuse me. How are you?
I'm all right. Have you?
Can you hear?
I can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Sorry?
I can hear you now. Have you got any
Now, my
responses to
question-
those questions?
Before I respond to that question, please, where did I go missing during my presentation? Did I complete it?
We're missing for the majority of it, I'm afraid.
Sorry?
It went missing most of the presentation. We couldn't hear, couldn't see.
You could not hear me.
No, it was difficult.
So can you hear me now, please?
Yes, we can hear you now quite clearly. Thank you.
Okay. So, well, so what was the question?
Well, there's been some questions which have been coming up in the chat section. I don't know if you can see them, but you know, Lucy's answered one question which was put forward by Rachel Lindlewood about the difference between urban and rural Kenya and inclusion in both situations, both locations. I don't know if you have any experience of this.
Well, in urban areas, there seems to be more development compared to the rural areas because many resources in Kenya are channeled towards urban centers. So you find that in special schools, for example, can you hear me, please?
Yeah, we can hear you fine, thank you.
So, for example, in Nairobi, I'm now in Nairobi, you find that schools have got electricity, hence inclusion takes place because persons with disabilities are included when learning to those schools. Sorry?
Okay. Right, okay then. Now listen, I think we're out of time now for those Kenya presentations. Now we're going to be having a 25-minute panel discussion, and I think are all the panelists ready and in place?
Yeah, I think we're
We got
Yeah.
Ian, and what other panelists are there ready? Paul, I think you're a panelist, aren't you? Hello?
Paul
So,
has raised his.
Am I allowed to present now? Am I allowed to present?
Are we going to have time for Samuel to put his presentation together?
I think if Samuel's internet connection is working now, that might be an idea.
Okay, Samuel, please proceed.
Sorry.
Yes, please carry on with your presentation.
So can you see the slide that I have just shared?
Yes, that's fine.
So I can start from scratch. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, my name is Samuel Muiti. I'm a person with disability in Kenya. I am 25 years of age, and professionally, I'm the communications officer. I work with a disabled people organization called Riziki Source that enables persons with disabilities to access job opportunities. So inclusion, let's describe inclusion. It is described as the practice or policy of providing equal access to opportunities and resources for people who might otherwise be excluded. So why is inclusion important? So, well, schools that are inclusive promote social interaction leading to success. Such schools also enhance full participation of learners with disabilities. And I earlier on gave an example of where I schooled. So the classes are not all classes were accessible for me because I'm a wheelchair user. You find that when my classes were located upper rooms, I could not attend such classes. They used to transfer me on the floor of the building so that they can ensure that I catch up with the rest. And that kind of segregated me from the rest because I never had that bit of interacting with my colleagues in school. So inclusivity also and representation amongst healthcare professionals can ease patient anxieties, increase compliance, and improve outcome as well. So what does this mean? So for example, when you have a person who has a hearing impairment as the medic in an hospital, chances are when a person who is hearing impaired comes for such services will be catered, his needs or her needs will be catered for well, because this person understands the language as well as what this person might face. So if we lack inclusion, for example, in such a situation, you will find that this person is administered wrong drugs or medication, and that could also result to health issues as well. So in the job sector, when employers or employees feel included, they are more engaged. There is higher engagement, and this results to profitability. An example is when you hire a person with visual impairment. This person doesn't have time to go and loiter around with the colleagues and the rest, because this person requires an assistant or a caregiver whenever this person wants to move. And yet that person will spend more time working. Hence, profitability of that entity increases. And what happens when inclusion does not take place? So when there is no inclusion, there is poor quality education for all children. And these are result to discriminatory attitudes. So schools that are not, for example, in Kenya, I gave an example earlier that you missed. So in Kenya, schools that are inclusive perform better than special schools that are meant like to segregate persons with disabilities. So if, for example, student A goes to a special school with the same grade and student B goes to the same special school, chances are the person who went to an integrated school will perform higher, because there is a boosted morale and they see themselves like the rest of the people, not as a person with disability. So lack of inclusion also causes mental health conditions that can cause long-term psychological damage to persons with disabilities. So, for example, I went to a mall recently, and what happened, the guard manning the entrance thought that I was actually begging, of which was not true. So he told us to go back. And I tried to explain to that person that I am a beggar, but I want to purchase. So at the moment that person understood that I was actually a customer, he actually felt so sorry for the decision, the words that he made. And actually that was as a result of lack of inclusion, because many people think persons with disabilities cannot do things on their own. They cannot buy, they cannot have money. So if persons with disabilities are included in the sectors or everywhere, people will learn to know that we are good people like the rest. So poverty, persons with disabilities that are not included, especially in the job markets, they result to being beggars. Why? Because this person requires basic needs like food and shelter maybe, and clothing. And what if this person doesn't have a job? This person will go to beg and still will make the rest of the population think that we are all beggars. So can we implement inclusion? So we should support data revolution to ensure timely, accurate, and high quality is used to achieve the measures sustainable development and to monitor progress and assess whether targets are being met by all people and segments of society. So in Kenya, there is a rule and a policy that every company should employ at least 5% of persons with disabilities. So the advantage of this to the employer is that in Kenya, when you employ such people, you do not remit tax as the rest of the employers, because you used your resources to provide a reasonable accommodation to that person. So it has a benefit to the employer, because you will pay lesser than the amount that you could have paid when you had not employed a person with disability. So again, working with young people to help break the discrimination. So if you include a person's young people when doing all your things, people will learn that we are capable of things. So there is a common phrase that we use here, that nothing for us without us. So another thing, we should hold ourselves and each other accountable, and designing policies and building inclusive institutions that put the farthest behind first and sustainable address the root cause of poverty and exclusion. That's the end of my presentation.
Oh, thank you very much, Samuel. I'm really pleased we were able to get that in the end. That's greatly appreciated. And like all the other presentations today, it's so heartening to know that we're all singing from the same song sheet. We just got to make sure that we lobby and we make sure that the powers to be make this world more inclusive for all of us. Now, listen, we have planned a 25-minute panel discussion. The panelists, if you could let me know you're there and ready, or let myself and the host know that you're ready, then we can try and open the floor to get some questions going.
The connection might be on.
Okay, Paul, yes, go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry, could I just ask Samuel, could you please stop sharing your screen, please? Thank you.
Okay. I'm trying to remove it. Okay.
Perfect, thank you.
So that come in back, you see, I'm up to perform a promise.
Trevor, can we invite Lucy and Abdul to join us as panelists, please?
Yes, sure. I think that'd be brilliant.
So Lucy
Yes,
and
I'm
Abdul.
part of the panel discussion, and I'm ready.
Thank you, Abdul.
And how about Lucy?
And how about Lucy?
Lucy, you might need to take yourself off mute and turn your camera back on.
So what am I supposed to do?
Yes, Paddy, you got your camera on. Thank you, Lucy. Now, we need some questions for you, unless you want to debate amongst yourselves, because, you know, there might be some language issues here getting questions in. I'm not sure.
Perhaps somebody has raised them to ask.
Can I just
Yes, please.
Can I just say something to start off, please?
Yes.
We've been discussing the whole debate around what is called inclusive education.
We've been debating and discussing around what we call inclusion, inclusive education.
And that debate has gone on as long as I've lived.
And that debate has gone on as long as I've lived.
I'm probably going for 65 years.
And it'll probably go on for another 65 years.
One thing I learned is I think Kenya told me this.
And one thing I've learned over the years, and being in Kenya, I think really taught me this.
Well, we think of inclusive education as just getting about taking the kids and getting information from.
We think of inclusive education as about just taking disabled people and putting them into a mainstream school.
And providing
the services to support that.
That is fantastic. That's fantastic when it can be achieved.
That is fantastic when it can be achieved.
And that's our ultimate goal.
And that should be our ultimate goal.
But I think we can also look at education from a different angle.
But I think we can look at inclusive education from a different angle.
And
if we have a special school,
how are the wider community involved in that?
How are the wider community involved in that?
How the wider community actually become part of that?
How does the wider community actually become part of that special school?
Because I don't mean as some form of community service.
I don't mean it is a form of community service.
I mean, getting alongside and learning together.
I mean, getting alongside and learning together.
In that concept, I might ask if Dr. Cecilia and Margaret is still in the room.
And on that note, am I allowed to ask if Dr. Cecilia Naga is still in the webinar?
You can ask, I don't know, Cecilia, are you there? Cecilia Nyagi?
I had the message here on my chat box that Lucy had left. I think she had international connection. I don't see, she's coming back, yes.
So if Celia, that's it, take yourself off mute to speak. Go ahead, Celia, you have the floor.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Nice to see you, Paul. Yeah. You wanted me to say something about inclusive education, or?
I'm just inviting you to respond to what I've just said.
I'm just inviting you to respond to what I just said about inclusive education.
That's inclusive education practice in Kenya?
Yeah, because you have experience in other parts of the I remember.
Yes, in Kenya, but from what I remember, you've experienced it in other parts of Africa as well.
Yes, I have been in inclusive education practice for quite some time, and I must say that we've been trying. We are still trying. We still are a long way because we started with institutional education, that's special needs education. And even before it was understood, we went to integrated education. Even before we had enough of that and even understood it, we went to inclusive education. And we are still staggering there, I must say. We still have a long way to go. But I must say that when Paul was here in Kenya, he did put a lot of effort to this. And I must say that I listened to Lucy, and I think quite much of the backup was during those days that a lot of effort was put into introducing inclusive education and changing the agenda. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Cecilia. That's very interesting, Paul. It seems like you did a lot of work when you were out there. And I don't know if Abdul wants to come back on anything how inclusive education is being put into place in Uganda.
Yes, Uganda ratified the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in 2008, and that meant that we had to implement, I think, is it Article 24, which talks about inclusive education. We started, I would say, haphazardly, because for very many years, we were used to having special schools for the deaf, the blind, and people with the mental disabilities. It is only the people with the physical disabilities that had some kind of inclusion even before the CRPD came into place. But for the other disabilities, really a lot of special education took place. So we started by encouraging local schools to include children with all kind of needs, especially those with special needs. And the problem is that the teachers, the specialized teachers that would render meaningful education were not very many. So many of the children that were taken to inclusive schools, so to speak, were not really learning as much as they would in special schools. Then sometime back around 2016, we embarked on the process of putting in place a policy on inclusive education. And within that policy, we had a section which talked about special needs education. Special needs education really meant having a twin track approach where we had special schools alongside inclusive schools. That way, we were able to get more schools into inclusion. We had accessibility improvements in terms of ramps and accessible toilets, but at the same time, we still maintained some of the traditional special schools up to this day. I want to say finally that the inclusive and special needs education policy is still in draft form. It has not yet been approved. So we're really in the infancy in terms of inclusive education. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for that, Abdul. It's appreciated. Now, we've had a comment in from Nick Andrews on the chat saying that are participants aware of the Index for Inclusion, that is a framework for school development built upon inclusive values. It was developed by Tony Booth, who is based at the University of Cambridge. It's been applied in many countries. I don't know if anybody's got a comment on that, but I'd like to comment on that first, actually. Yeah, I'm aware of this. However, in parts of Africa, which are very remote, where there's no money and there's no government assistance to finance schools, it becomes very, very difficult to actually implement. And you know, it's there's a lot of Western academics who are putting together such research, but I'd like them to actually spend some time in rural locations in Africa to see how such practices can be implemented. That's just a personal comment. I don't know if anybody else on the panel has got any other comments.
I want to make a comment that the challenge with inclusive education is that it goes alongside technological development. And in Africa, we are mostly consumers of technology and not manufacturers of it. So it is still very expensive to get assistive technology that will assist in inclusive education. Again, when you compare the urban to the rural, you'll find that in most rural areas in Africa, there's no electricity. Therefore, charging computers and phones is a nightmare, let alone issues of internet connectivity and other services that would enable inclusive education to take place. So it's really, really hard because our technological levels are still very low.
Oh, thank you for that. Which is why, I don't know if you're aware, but I actually run an organization called Response Able Assistance, and I'm working with Cecilia, actually in a project in Kenya, and we're actually running out solar-powered charging points for phones and for technical equipment. And I think that's so important personally. And anyway, just a quick personal comment in the middle of this. I'm a bit out of place, I'm afraid. But so is any other feedback to the panel on inclusivity? Right, now time-wise, Paul, please, go ahead.
That this is to talk about how her thing and in the mass movement, how her local and mass movement have been involved in lobbying governments.
Can I just ask Lucy how her local and national work has helped when lobbying governments?
You're on mute, I think.
Yes. What I have come to learn over time is that you realize when DCC started, when Paul was in Kenya, we started a self-help group. As we moved on, we realized that we couldn't do much with the self help group, because in Kenya there's some work that it cannot do. We rallied other disabled people's organizations. We were able to form a CBO, and this CBO registered with a national organization called UDPK, that is United Disabled Persons of Kenya. After we registered with the UDPK, we were now involved in the national agenda. We could be called for trainings, we could be called for advocacy meetings, and in fact, we, even as a group, we've been actively involved in the current discourse where we are trying to amend the Disability Act 2003. So from there, we joined other movements that, like the women movements. We realized also that as a group as a whole, we could not, the rights of women with disabilities, of course, they were not well articulated. So we went again and formed a women rights group. We joined other women rights groups, both disabled women's rights group and non-disabled women's rights group. So, and currently our group of women is carrying out a project. We call it Empower to Protect Women and Girls with Disabilities Against SGBV. This project was funded by CREU Kenya, that is Center for Rights Education and Awareness, and the funds were availed by the government of Canada. So you can see how we networked. And for us, what has worked with us is networking. We've done a lot of networking. We've gotten a lot of exposure. And that way we've been able as an organization to do much even on the ground, also to be known. We are known even by the government officials. We are able to talk one-on-one when we have issues we raise with them. So we had to change the attitude of that lobbying and advocating when we are singing rights songs, or we are storming offices, we are insulting people. We moved from that kind of advocacy. Now we have moved to a kind of advocacy where we really get those people in the table. We explain to them what are our needs. And yes, that is working in Kenya, because now the issues of disabilities are taking roots even in the minds of public officers and even private sector. And I can say that this experience, maybe it's an experience that can be even replicated in other places, because we've realized that arguing with government will never ever solve any problem. But when we are on the table, we explain to them what our needs are, how we want it to be done. Because you know, I know people can grant you your rights, but they can do it the wrong ways. But when they involve you, they are able to give you the right way, and you are able to, you know, show them how they can do it better. Yeah.
Lucy, you're so right. Co-production is the way forward, and we must bring all parties to the table in any form of, I don't even call it negotiation. I call it common sense, just talking, bringing people together. And you're going the right, your approach is right, and I respect that. Anyway, listen, we're coming to the time now where I don't know if there's any more questions to the panel, or if the panel want to add anything more. But we're coming to really to the end of this session. Oh yeah, I've got a question here from David. Sorry, David, I pronounced your name wrong. Akura. It says, what role does local communities and families play in inclusion? I don't know if any of the panel want to interact or answer that. So the question is, what role does local communities and families play in inclusion?
I wanted to say that the family can play a very crucial role in inclusion, because a lot of what doesn't take place in terms of inclusion is really attitudinal. So if you nurture a very good attitude from the community and the family, a lot of innovative ideas on how to include people with disabilities start around that place, in the family and in the community. And then other issues will come, policy issues, accessibility issues, those will come in later. But if we have the right attitude, then it is very, very easy to innovate, to come out with new ideas on how to get people with disabilities included. So yes, the community and the family have a crucial role to play here.
Brilliant. Paul, did you have something to say there?
the fundamental pillar is acceptance.
I think the fundamental pillar for inclusion is acceptance for who you are
What you are.
and what you are.
I think that is still respected and loved as a deaf Muslim person.
If you feel respected or loved as a deaf and disabled person,
You will. The first part of inclusion.
that's the first part of inclusion.
The right to live.
The right to live,
The right to participate.
right to participate.
The how question comes with that.
The how question comes later.
But as you said, what's that the big right to live in place. And that will come.
Well, thank you. Thank you, panelists. Now, this has been a fantastic day, and I want to draw this to a conclusion now. We've learned an awful lot from each other. Lived experience is so important. Storytelling is even more important. And I think, we have to express ourselves. And what Paul Linderwood said at the end there is respect yourself and be yourself. And it's very, 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 very important. And all the panelists, all the speakers, thank you very much for a fantastic day. Remember, we're here to celebrate the International Day for Persons with Disabilities. And, long may it continue. Now, we'd like to have some questions which are coming up now. If you'd be so kind as to fill these in, it would be greatly appreciated. So I'll just give you time to go through them. And I'm going to be filling them in myself, actually. Might be a bit biased, but what the hell. While you're filling them in, Lucy, I really hope we have some more on this. And I think we've started something here because, if we can all work together from all different countries, we become a stronger force. And, I know Hub Cymru Africa, and particularly Disabilities in Wales and Africa, we're here to unite people and to make things happen. So we've got the foundations of something very positive coming out of here.
Okay, I think that looks like everybody who has had a chance to, everybody who wants to do the form has had a chance to. So I'm going to end the poll now. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining in today. And well, have a fantastic year, and I look forward to us all meeting up in pleasant circumstances throughout the next in the future. Anyway, but thank you very much for everybody for taking part today. Okay, farewell. Bye-bye.